Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Three Nails Information Security podcast. I am Vincent Mintz, the founder of Three Nails Information Security. We are a boutique cybersecurity firm focusing on offensive security primarily. Today, we're joined by Matt Cox, who is a CISO at Mindsight. Matt, I'm excited to talk to you and hear about some of your passions and things you have to say surrounding training and cybersecurity as a whole. Tell us a little bit about your background, why you're here, and what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah, great, Vincent. Thank you for inviting me, having me on the show. I appreciate it. My name is Matt Cox. I'm the CISO at Mindsight. We're a managed service provider in the Chicago metro area. Been around for about 20 years. We offer a wide range of services from enterprise data center, networking, security, collaboration, a whole host of services for our clients. I've been with Mindsight for 14 years now. I have a long background in IT. I came from the carrier space, then went into some networking. I spent a number of years doing voice over IP, systems management, consulting, and then in the last 6-8 years or so, have really started to focus solely on security.
Sweet. Okay. Do you feel like you take cybersecurity into your personal life?
Oh yeah, to a great degree. Yeah,
Yeah.
my family likes to make fun of me too. They're like, "Well, Dad's not going to be happy about that password." And um, I try to make it fun and bring those good principles in both to my family and primarily to teach my children that these are not skills that they're born with, and the
Yep.
schools do a good job of teaching them to the extent that they can. But good digital hygiene is something that's really going to be critical for them as they get older.
Hmm.
So I feel like that's really important.
Good. Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit about your background. I think you might be one of my first guests that operates as a CISO at an MSP. So excited to have you
Oh,
and
great.
hear some insights in the unique perspective you have sort of offering services as well. I think that's cool. So we have that in common. But I've kind of heard cybersecurity referred to and guess like labeled as a blocker to business operations.
The
And
Department of No, right?
yeah, exactly. Which, conveniently or inconveniently, I don't know. It causes, especially I feel like executive leadership to kind of sometimes skirt the security themselves, which is like a big gap, especially for, um, the big dogs up there in the C-suite world. But how do you help your clients sort of balance the need for security with the goal of running functional and efficient business?
Sure. So I think we have ransomware actors really to help us or to thank for the change in security mindset. 10 years ago, companies would talk about security, but there wasn't a lot threatening them from a business standpoint. And so the security department often ended up getting labeled, like we joked, the Department of No. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. um, Along comes this really significant threat to organizations of all sizes. And that really changed the mindset, I think, of executives and business operators on really needing security. And I think to some degree, a lot of security organizations saw that as an opportunity maybe to mature their mindset as well, to be an enabler for the business, but still, working with the business to try to protect the organization. Um, so to answer your question on how you integrate that in from a security standpoint, we have to be the mindset that we are still a cost center, even if we're reducing risk for the organization. We're not generating revenue. Maybe we're protecting revenue, protecting the company's reputation and that sort of thing. But if you're not working hand in hand with the business and trying to enable it to perform its core function, then of course you're going to get sidelined and pushed back. It has to be a balance of mitigating that risk. Organizations deal with risk in all facets, not just cybersecurity, and they
Yeah.
make those measured decisions. And our job really is to bring those risks to the table, help the organization understand what risks are relevant and which ones are not, and encourage them to make the right investments in the right area. I think the
Mm.
biggest problem, I think, has primarily been communication, not necessarily budget or implementation or any of those things. It's communicating the realistic need to the organization.
Mm. Yeah, one thing that you said that was highlighted to me was like that security is a mindset,
Mhm.
uh, not just a technical process. Um, and being, an MSP provider, I'm just curious, like how you guys are. I know you mentioned you kind of encourage, you know, good hygiene. I'm sure, and good security posture. But how are you sort of instilling that mindset into your clients?
Sure. So thankfully, my clients are coming to me because they see the need for good security hygiene, and they're not sure
That's
where
nice.
to make those investments. Right?
Okay.
They know, they see the real threat. Headlines are all over the place. Companies
Hmm.
getting breached, and we target the SMB market, and they can't really afford to have a breach. A large enterprise, they're going to have a dip in stock shares. They're
Hmm.
have some reputational damage, but they're going to recover. I mean, we saw the most recent activity with CrowdStrike, which wasn't even really a security incident.
Hmm.
Their stock took a big dip, and now it's already tracking higher than it was before the hoopla. So,
Mm.
but our audience is a little bit different. For SMBs, it's can really be an existential threat, with the average cost of a ransomware attack, numbering in the millions. Not sure if those numbers are really accurate, but
Sure.
$1 million cost to a small business very likely will put them out of business.
Yeah. 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 Do you feel like training, plays a role in helping employees understand, I guess, the human element of security, the significance of the role they play, frontline, sort of first line of defense, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Security and awareness training, I think, it's not number one, but it's way up there. The majority of attacks begin with a phishing email, and so all of
Mm-hmm.
your employees are your first line of defense.
Mm.
If you're hoping to train them to never click on phishing links, and that's your only defense, you're going to have a bad time, right? What you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
do with any security control is measurably reduce risk. You can't eliminate it. If you treat your folks like they're part of the problem, and punish people for clicking on links, then all you're doing is effectively building a culture of fear. People are afraid to
Mm.
report security incidents. They're afraid that they've done something wrong. They're going to get fired, and that ultimately is counterproductive for the organization. What
Mm.
we try to do is build a positive culture of security awareness training, giving them relevant and timely training material that they
Mm.
can even use in their personal life. A lot of these attack methods are things that happen to us outside of work. Phishing
Mm-hmm.
emails are a good example. Um, and so, by building a positive security awareness culture within the organization, people feel like they can participate in helping, and being part of the solution instead of being treated like part of the problem.
Okay.
Driving your click rates to zero ultimately isn't going to help the organization. You can
Mm-hmm.
craft your phishing emails to be absolutely terrible, and that click rate will be zero, but that isn't what the attackers are doing. And you can also
Mm-hmm.
drive that click rate up to 100%, if you spend a lot of time really putting together the perfectly crafted phishing email. What you're trying to do is mimic what the attackers are doing,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately drive that reporting mechanism. You want your employees to be part of the solution in reporting those phishing emails, so that you have an opportunity to respond before the attacker has gained a foothold in your environment, and is busy exploiting all of the other vulnerabilities that you have.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting comment you made about like you kind of called it like positive. I can't remember if you said positive training or
Mhm.
yeah. I I I'd like you to kind of zoom in on that a little bit and
Sure.
what exactly you feel like positive training is because I've been asked on social engineering engagements to disclose who the clickers are, who the people who gave me their credentials are, who the people are that downloaded our our malware on the red team
Mhm.
engagement. um, and by request we do so, of course, but I'm curious, like, yeah, tell me more about what positive training looks like.
Sure, sure. Yeah, you're giving those reports over to people that are likely going to haul those employees into a room and give them a stern talking to, or
Sure.
worst case, they get fired. And
Sure.
that's, like I said, exactly the opposite of what you want. So what we do, is we gamify it. So when folks get their phishing emails, and we phish the entire company on a regular basis, And everybody knows they're coming. They're random emails. They come at different times throughout the month, so you don't have employees tipping each other off. Hey, this is probably fake. This is not. And when they click on the link, it drops them to a landing page. It says, here's the phishing email that you got, and here are the flags, things that you should be looking for. And that's it. That's the end of it. We don't send them to punitive training. Nobody, their manager doesn't get an email saying, Bobby clicks a lot, clicked on this phishing email again. That's the end of it. Everybody gets the same security awareness training every month.
Yeah.
You and I talked about this, I think, in a previous meeting about larger organizations needing to have tailored training for specific job roles. And I think that's totally appropriate in a large enough organization. But for the SMB space, just giving everybody 5 to 10 minutes of relevant, timely training every month, not killing them with PowerPoint presentations at the end of every year that they're going to forget about in a week. And then we use a feature called the leaderboard. We have departments divided up. And we kind of, I don't want to say pit them against each other, but we make it fun. This department finished their security awareness training ahead of everybody else. We'll give out little prizes. We send out emails congratulating them. We don't admonish the people that didn't have time to do training that month, right? Folks are busy with different things in their life.
Right.
Don't make the program punitive. Build people up, encourage them to report, spend as little time as possible on the negative aspect, somebody that did click, and use that as a training opportunity, not an opportunity to punish them.
Okay. I'm going to go somewhere. I wasn't expecting to kind of go.
All right. Let's make it interesting.
I want to give you one more scenario. So, while being very, redacted, I'll say, at a physical engagement with a large company. It was a government organization, and our objective was given to us was to get into the data center hosted in this facility. And they had 2 very large facilities, which we pen tested both facilities in the same day. But ultimately, I was able to tailgate into the facility. I was able to coerce one of the maintenance guys of the building to bring me back to the back where the managers are, the managing supervisors of the facility. At which point, they gave the guy the go-ahead, to get me into the data center, at which point I cloned his badge. And then, I went my separate ways, came back 20 minutes later, and I now own the facility. Sure. I'm able to go to the secondary facility, use the clone badge, and so in that circumstance, there's one person that is kind of the single point of failure. How would you recommend an organization to handle something like that?
Sure.
That person.
So did that individual follow corporate process?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Definitely. Well, and that's the challenge here, because I used him as a pawn to go to his supervisor. I was already in the building, which to get in the building, you have to be badged, quote, technically. But, I just tailgated my way in to the employee side. But maybe it exposed their policy, maybe it exposed him. I don't know. But I would say no to your question, probably.
Yeah. So if they were breaking the rules, if they were negligent, right? If it was clear that this person didn't care whether you had access to the data center or not, then punishments may be required at that point. But 9 times out of 10, this as a physical penetration tester, you're either finding an unlocked door, or you're social engineering your way in, exploiting that level of trust that humans inherently have. And we can't punish people for being human. We have to build processes and controls that take that element out of it. So, perfect example, if you were able to clone the badge, then there's an MFA problem there. That badge should not work without a second factor in getting you into that room. That's
a great point, too. Yeah, right. Great answer. Yeah, well said. I think the key there is that, what I was curious was, if there's a strongly failing individual that causes a large compromise of the company, it's how would you recommend? But I think that is oftentimes the case. It only takes one. And I think of there's a group of teenagers, I think they were named Lapsus, a year or two ago, that compromised Microsoft and think Okta by just doing social engineering calls,
Yeah.
but it was like single point of failures. But
Right. The MGM one is a great example that they social engineered their way into the help desk, and the help desk was able to remove MFA from some of their Okta tokens. Do you fire your whole help desk because they were being helpful? I mean, it's in the name, right? The failure there was that the help desk had the authority to remove MFA tokens from administrative accounts. So I'm a believer that if within your company, if someone has failed, they made a mistake, it is a failure of management. It's not a failure of that employee. Either you didn't train them appropriately or you didn't hire the right person. But ultimately,
Sure.
the buck needs to stop at management, and they're ultimately responsible for that.
Luck plays a factor too. I feel
Sure.
like with new employees coming in, but yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. So, with that all said, like you have clients of varying sizes. How do you sort of guide each organization, like to help them determine the right level of investment into their cybersecurity?
Sure. So we start all engagements with a comprehensive assessment. Let's find out where you are so we can build a roadmap of where you want to go. And ultimately, through that assessment process, we'll identify areas that put them at great risk and areas that don't. We'll prioritize the high risks, help them develop a budget for remediating. Maybe it's a policy change, maybe it's policy development. A lot of small organizations don't have any written policy. They're busy day to day just fighting fires. So helping them begin that policy and documentation journey often comes up. Helping them with their security awareness training program, making, setting aside budget to refresh antiquated hardware. It can come from all different angles. Helping them get MFA implemented, particularly on their externally facing applications. A lot of times those breaches either begin with a phishing email that ultimately allow them to deliver malware on the endpoint. Organizations that don't have EDR aren't going to pick that up. If they're not delivering malware, they're scooping those credentials and often using them to access the environment through VPN. If your VPN doesn't have MFA, then you're defenseless. So the big three are really training those users to avoid phishing emails to the extent that they can. MFA on all externally facing apps, so compromised credentials are relatively useless. And then making sure that they have backups of the environment that are untouchable by an attacker. You need to be able to recover. The organization has to be resilient. Those are really the big three that we focus on. Organizations that have met those goals, then we'll keep on working our way down the line. It's rare that I have an organization that has met that equilibrium of security spend to risk mitigation.
Interesting. Okay. At what point in that sort of phase do you recommend your clients do penetration tests? Because when you said take a snapshot of the environment, I wholeheartedly believe that pen tests are momentary snapshots of your environment every single one time a year. Is like it's not enough to just do a pen test. Like you should always be following up with blue team remediation hours and then purple team potentially even after that. In between pen tests, even if you have the budget for something like that. But
Sure.
at what point in that sort of process would you recommend a client conduct a pen test?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think in the enterprise space, that answer is different. I hold probably an unpopular opinion when it comes to penetration testing. I think there are two scenarios that I recommend my clients do a penetration test. One is they don't have any security budget and they need to scare the pants out of management to loosen up the purse strings, right?
Yep.
Penetration tests are great for that. Or the opposite, they think that they've got all the security they need and that they don't have any problems and they need to be shown that they're misguided. I have a third scenario that I'm starting to implement for organizations that are going to outsource their EDR to SOC as a service vendors, and we're seeing more and more organizations do that. You want to test that environment and make sure that those SOC services are actually detecting the things that you're paying them to detect, right? And so that's a third case scenario. Get in there, make some noise, and see if the SOC actually calls. Then you know that six-figure number you're writing is actually doing something for you.
Well said. Well said. I hate to put you on the spot, but I feel like I've talked to a couple MSP owners, and one thing I have a challenge with as a pen test provider, that's one of our primary services. As mentioned at the beginning, we're an offensive boutique firm. Is I feel like a lot of MSPs are okay with sort of like mostly conducting automated pen testing using AI or whatever, or just conducting it themselves, conducting a vuln scan and calling it a pen test to a degree. Do you have any sort of opinions surrounding that being an MSP?
Sure. Yeah, I have some strong opinions about that, actually. I have had clients bring to me their pen test reports from other vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite clear, you go through it, it was really a vulnerability scan that they paid far too much
Mm-hmm.
money for.
Mm-hmm.
So I make it my mission to really help my customers understand that a pen test and a vulnerability scan are very different things.
Yes.
We do vulnerability scans for clients so that we can help identify known vulnerabilities and prioritize the remediation for those. But that isn't a pen test.
Okay.
For clients that are at the point where a pen test is appropriate, we outsource that function. Pen testing is a very rigorous discipline that folks need to spend. If you're not doing it every day, all day, then you're not going to be doing a good job. And so that is an area of specialization that we refer to the experts, such as yourself.
I didn't really expect that good of an answer, so I'm glad.
I do think from an industry standpoint, I think that so pen testers such as yourself, you have a business to run, right? And so you got to go to market and encourage your customers to do business with you. I think where some pen testing companies maybe go a little bit awry is they will find any way to get into a customer's environment to get the win. But that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of what the risk is to that organization. Attackers will do a lot, but they're not going to, custom build malware in order to attack a specific environment, unless you're an enterprise that has something that's, that's worthwhile for them to do that. If your threat is advanced persistent threats and nation states, it's a whole different game from the market that we work in, where your typical threat is criminal activity. Those criminals are going to try a few things, and if that doesn't work, then they're just going to move on to the next target. So you only have to raise the bar so much. And so I think it's appropriate for a pen tester, if you're attacking organizations in that market, that you try to closely align more of an adversarial emulation kind of service. Absolutely. Than by any means necessary am I breaking into this customer.
Yes. Which it's funny that you mentioned, building malware samples tailored to the client, because in, red team or adversary emulation, that is exactly what we do. So
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
I know pen testers that build their own custom EDR defeating tools. They can get around CrowdStrike. They can get around SentinelOne.
Yeah.
Are the criminals doing that? In rare instances, but for the most part, they're not going to bother with that. At least that's my experience.
That's a really good point. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the path of least resistance, use the public open source tools. I mean, countless times on X or Twitter, I've seen, all of these incident responses and these great responders just like memeing on the threat actor using public tools that are getting detected. They're dropping them to disk. All these really terrible practices.
Right.
Like
but they work because, right? And so that's what they're going to do.
That is true. That is true.
Until we raise the bar to where those things don't work anymore, then that's what we're really defending against.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I guess the last thing I want to bring up is like when we were offline, one of the things that, stood out when I had asked, what are you passionate about, was training, and I guess my question is, what is it about training specifically that, you're passionate about, or, makes your employees or your clients successful in the long run? So organizations can maybe take what you're going to say and, potentially implement it themselves.
Sure. So I think I'm mostly passionate about security awareness training because it's really where the security organization meets the rest of the business. It's your opportunity to build that positive security culture and to get the rest of the organization to support you in your goal to protect the company, right? If you're not building those positive relationships, then you're going to meet resistance when you want to implement those new controls. We're going to roll out MFA everywhere. Oh man, I don't want to deal with MFA or password changes, for example. And when you say we're going to change our password policy to 15 characters, you're going to get a lot of resistance from an organization if you haven't already built those relationships
Yeah.
and help them understand why you need to do that. I'm not coming in here making a 15-character password policy because it's just fun for me, right? There are reasons that we need to do this, and I understand that it presents some friction to the organization. But we'll make concessions in other areas. Hey, if you guys marketing wants to use TikTok, shutter at TikTok. But if it helps them further their goals, then maybe that's an area that you can make a concession. Those sorts of things. You really have to build those relationships.
Love it. That's so important to be able to build that relationship and get a good read on, employee sort of state of mind.
Right.
There's so much fatigue, even for myself, surrounding MFA and password.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And being dogmatic about our security controls isn't going to get us anywhere either. I mean, I see other folks in the industry saying, if you're not doing it this way, then you're stupid. Well, that shoe doesn't fit everyone, right? You have to meet the business where it is.
Sure.
And security is an iterative process. You start somewhere, and you help the company move in the right direction, even if it's a little bit at a time. You're not going to boil the ocean and get everything 100% secure overnight. You're never going to get to 100% security anyway. You're going to find some place where you've met that equilibrium. The company has invested in reducing risk to the extent that it's willing to.
Great. Well said. Yeah. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on, man.
Thanks so much for inviting me on the show. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to reach out to you, LinkedIn, sort of the best route.
LinkedIn's really the best way.
Okay. Yeah, we'll obviously have you tagged here. So thanks again for coming on. If anybody wants to reach out, I encourage you to hit Matt for some MSP services. Matt, where are you guys located again?
Our company is based in the Chicago metro area, but really we do business with companies globally.
Okay, wonderful. Sweet. Well, similar here at 3 Nails as well. So any questions, comments, thoughts, needs for any services, I will be glad to connect you to Matt, or, feel free to reach out for any offensive security services. But thanks again, Matt. We'll
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right, take care.